Oh, sorry to sort of stand here in anticipation. We're doing something different today, which is live streaming this event. So we're just frantically, non-verbally communicating to make sure we've got it all right. So, Dahadjith, Da Pabonnen, how welcome then Castadal Ilo Canuic. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Cornish Music Symposium. It's lovely to see so many of you here today. Thanks for joining us and hope you've been enjoying the Lowender Festival. There's plenty going on all day today, this evening and tomorrow to get stuck into. We're really excited to have the first symposium in person since 2019. So it's great to be back in a room together, but we're keeping the best of the new and live streaming this event over YouTube so that more people can join us. And if you're joining us online, please drop a note in the YouTube chat if you can to say hello, where you're tuning in from. So that's particularly appropriate for this year because the symposium is also appearing on the Institute of Cornish Studies Diaspora Seminar Series programme because today we're focusing on Cornish music in the diaspora. I'm sure many of you are well aware, but for anyone who doesn't know, during the sort of 19th and early 20th centuries, thousands of Cornish people moved abroad to the colonies and the new worlds as opportunities for mining emerged, but also other types of work and reasons as well. And with them, they took all sorts of Cornish culture, and music was an important aspect of community life then and continues to be so today. So this afternoon, we're going to hear from 3 musicians, 2 of whom are in the diaspora and 1 from Cornwall who has been inspired by and visited and written about the diaspora. So to start with, we're zooming forward in time to Robynne Sanderson, who's going to be joining us from Broken Hill in New South Wales, and she'll be talking to us about the music of the Broken Hill Community Voices Choir, which she has been part of for over 20 years. Then we'll hear from Richard Trethewey from Cornwall, who's with us in person today. He'll be talking about his songwriting, which has been inspired by the Cornish diaspora and his visits there, and Cornish heritage overseas, and he'll be playing and singing a few songs for us in person. And finally, Jim Wearne is joining us virtually from Illinois in the USA to talk about his own creative output as a singer-songwriter. Jim also has Cornish heritage and has been an active musician for many years and has visited Cornwall a number of times to pursue his interest and connection with Cornwall as a place and as a culture. So after each speaker, we'll be taking questions in the room and from online. So if you're joining us from the live stream, you can ask questions in there and we'll be monitoring that to make sure that we don't leave you out. Bit of housekeeping, I've said it twice already, but this is being live streamed and recorded. If you don't want to appear in a video or a stream, please speak to Merv, Chris or I and let us know. And as I've mentioned, we're in person for the first time in 3 years, so I have to mention that we're not expecting fire alarms, but if there is a fire alarm, please head out of the door and out of the doors to the courtyard and follow any directions from Cress and Kerno. Bathrooms are out on the right there, and all in all, we're aiming to run to about 3 p.m. and we'll need to keep to time because there's so much going on. So we want to give everybody time to get to what they need to afterwards. So that's quite enough from me. So first up, we're delighted to have Robynne Sanderson's presentation or conversation with Merv Davey, which we'll play, and then she'll be joining us for questions.
Written down. Robynne, nice to see you. I haven't quite worked out what time it is where you are, but it's early afternoon for us. So it's evening here, so. Exactly.
Fifth hour of Roderic's in Australia, below Broken Hill in Australia.
Dave, that's the safest way of doing it. Yes. Well, welcome, and thanks very much for coming to speak to us. This tech is wonderful, isn't it? We can speak very informally. Now, you come from Broken Hill, which is in the outback, and I think the outback is also a little bit of a mystery to us. Where exactly is Broken Hill, and why is it in the outback?
Well, I can tell you where Broken Hill is, but I think the outback remains a mystery as to where it actually is. So we're a mining town in the far west of New South Wales, so far west that we're almost in South Australia. So it's about a 2-day drive to our state capital. And we're out in the bush. It's very dry country. It doesn't rain much, but beautiful rugged hills and kangaroos hopping through the hills and that sort of thing. So isolation and, you know, being away from the big cities.
So basically, the outback is out in the wilderness, I suppose. Is that right? Is that what you would say?
So yes, it's not. You haven't got people on farms growing crops and that sort of thing.
Right. Now, you've got this wonderful choir, and I can see that the Broken Hill community voices in the background. They're wonderful. Now, tell me how you started.
We started in 2000. There was a woman who came to Broken Hill. We would say she was from away. She wasn't born in Broken Hill, but she wanted to start up a choir. She'd been in a choir in other towns that sang social justice songs, and she wanted to do the same thing here in Broken Hill. So I joined that choir back in 2000, and then about 5 years later, after the musical director left, I became the musical director of the choir. So we sing mostly social justice songs, but also world music and songs about Broken Hill and the region.
Gosh, that's quite a wide repertoire. I like the idea of social justice song. That's a good way of connecting with the world, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we sing songs that are specifically about, you know, peace or something like that, but also we sing songs from lots of different countries that I suppose it reflects Broken Hill's got a very multicultural heritage. So those songs in themselves, because we're singing songs from other countries, that helps to engender respect for all different cultures.
Gosh, it does, doesn't it? In a sense, then, it's very natural for you to slot in and do some Cornish songs as well in that case, I think.
Yes, because the Cornish are part of that rich tapestry that makes up Broken Hill.
Yeah. Yes. And we've got this wonderful song from you, Cernova's Vikin. Perhaps the best introduction to the choir is to listen to Cernova's Vikin.
Cornwall forever, we'll rally at the call. Cornwall forever, we're coming one and all. Cornwall forever, and shout Trelawny died. These 20,000 Cornishmen will know the reason why. Colonel is vegan, drink off the vegan roll. Colonel is vegan, we tune an empago. Colonel is vegan, there wrote Trelawny bras. Macugans villa Tuscano, off the toll and cuss. Fish, tin and copper, make way for Cornishmen. Fish, tin and copper, he come to mow and pin. Fish, tin and copper, and shout Trelawny die. His 20,000 Cornishmen will know the reason why. Colonel is vegan, drink off the vegan roll. Colonel is vegan, it's human and pago. Colonel is vegan, they're all Trelawny bras. Macugans villa Tuscano, off the toll and cuss. Colonel is vegan, drink off the vegan roll. Colonel is vegan, it's human and pago. Colonel is vegan, they're all Trelawny bras. Macugans villa Tuscano, off the toll and cuss. Colonel is vegan.
Wonderful. It's fantastic to hear an Australian choir singing in the Cornish like that. What encouraged the choir to sing actually in Cornish?
Well, the Cornish people have been part of Broken Hill's, part of the fabric of Broken Hill right from the start. The first mining leases were pegged here in 1883, and there was a Cornishman that was there right at the start, and Cornish miners came here, in the 1880s into the 1890s. A lot of them came from Moonta, where there was other mining activity, and some came from the goldfields in Victoria as well. So it was sort of drawing people from all different places.
So they were already probably second generation Cornish by the time they arrived at Broken Hill, because they arrived in Wallaroo and the Copper Triangle, I think probably 1840, something like that.
1860s, I think it was.
1860s,
but yes,
1860s.
Mostly
Yeah.
most of them were second generation once they
Yeah.
came to Broken. There were a few sort of first generation, but mostly second generation. And it's amazing that people are still proud of their Cornish heritage, 140 years later.
Gosh, I think it is, and it's still part of your identity in Broken Hill. Did the choir find it very difficult to learn Cornish? You're a Cornish speaker, I think.
I am now. I've been learning Cornish for a couple of years. I've just finished my second grade exams. But when we did that first song, I hadn't really had any experience of speaking Cornish or singing in Cornish before. So I had some help from someone in the South Australian Cornish choir to teach me the pronunciation, make sure that I got it right, and then I sort of taught the choir. So, and they were very enthusiastic about it because quite a few of them have got Cornish heritage themselves. So it was a great process.
It must be a wonderful feeling to be able to connect up with Cornwall in that way, and they liked singing in Cornish. It's a very good way of connecting with the language, isn't it, to sing in Cornish?
Well, it is. If you're trying to learn a language, sometimes it's easier to sing the language, and then the speaking sort of comes more easily.
Gosh, yes, that's amazing. Yes, it's and I mean, it must be quite a small community in Broken Hill. Is that right?
Well, there's about 18,000 people. So a lot of them have been here for several generations, and those are the ones that have got the Cornish ancestry. Then we've got the people who've come more recently, and after the Second World War, there were Greeks, Italians, Filipinos, just a real melting pot. So you've got those older generations that have got the Cornish heritage, and then it's all enriched by these other cultures that have come in as well. But there's a very solid base of people who still relate to their Cornish heritage.
You sent me some lovely photographs, which I use in that video montage to go with the song, and you can see the story of Cornwall there, and you can see the mine workings and that, but you can also see them set in this very different environment. This the hills, the rolling hills, and out of the outback, and that is Broken Hill. And does the mining dominate the town? Is it? Can you see it wherever you are in the town?
Well, there's absolutely no doubt when you're coming to Broken Hill that you're in a mining town, because the line of load runs right through the middle of the town. So you've got the skimp dumps, the line of load, the mines right in the middle of the town. So in the early days, you had these poor Cornish miners who were on foot or on a bicycle at best. So they wanted to be not too far away from the mine. Otherwise, they'd be walking half the day to get to work. So all the houses grew up around the mine. Yeah, so it just dominates the centre of town.
That's very much a Cornish thing. What marks out Cornwall and the Industrial Revolution is that the miners were living where they worked, and the mine landscape was part of the landscape you lived in, and it sounds like that's the same in Broken Hill.
There were lots of mines in the district. I remember there was one mine called the Consul mine, which is that's a very familiar Cornish thing, and it was just on the edge of the main line of load, and there was a Consul Street. So you had the mine, and then right there next to it, Consul Street, you had people living and working at the mine.
Gosh,
and, I think that's been reclaimed by the skimp dumps now.
But it sounds like you're driving between Redruth and Camborne, with all these mine workings around. I imagine that once it was underway, the Cornish miners who moved there must have felt very at home.
They did indeed, and there were so many of them. In South Australia, they formed a Cornish association. I think it was 1890. And then all the Cornish people in Broken Hill, inspired by that, formed a Cornish association the next year. They said, if they can do that in Adelaide, we can do it here. So they'd get together, and music was always a big part of that, and they'd have rousing renditions of Trelawny to finish off.
we get some wonderful reports of the diaspora and in Australia in some of the local newspapers of around that time. So there was clearly a lot of toing and throwing. Now, what interests us obviously is the culture and the music. Now, one of the traditions which I understand went out there was Christmas and the wassail, and you've got a lovely wassail you've sung for us. Should we listen to that now?
That sounds like a great idea.
Na David Hughes, a blessed no toast, he gerard a rustle, a blessed bring toast, ganz lagen wassail, 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 low in a thuggin, jolly wassail. A mistress, a mister of a settling she, Rock trailers to million, he travel and see, ganz hagen wassail, 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 low in a thuggin, jolly wassail. The away haggis of a little, for spiders the floor, dream of wood or smarter, on our own, ganz hagen wassail, 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 low in a thuggin, jolly wassail. Neale wait haggis balance, or spiders in take, our haggis for numbers, ganz helder mar play, ganz hagen wassail, 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 low in a thuggin, jolly wassail. Our mistress, our mister, Father Gillow, head core, of Glenville and Goffin, our cedar, our core, ganz hagen wassail, 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 low in a thuggin, jolly wassail. Our mistress, our mister, in a sickness and taste, we'll have our neighbours be the pace, ganz hagen wassail, 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 low in a thuggin, jolly wassail. Then of wood not limit, our women's best here, our bantu, our elder mavir, ganz hagen wassail, 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 low in a thuggin, jolly wassail.
Wassail. Now, tell us how you came to sing the Red Ruth wassail.
Well, that particular one, I visited Cornwall in 2017, and I happened to buy a few music CDs while I was there. And one of them was called Neale, a Cornish Christmas, and it had lots of wonderful carols on it. And our choirs learned a couple of those. I've got a bit of show and tell here. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, right,
That's
I remember
CD
that one well. Yes, 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 yes.
It's a wonderful CD, and the wassail in particular, I just thought this will be a great one for our choir. So I love the old traditions associated with the wassail and the tongue-in-cheek humour that's part of the song as well. But this particular one, we tend to sing it, so at Christmas time, when it's 40 degrees here in Australia and we're wearing short sleeves, we do have lots of lovely Christmas traditions, and our choir will be busking at community Christmas events. So last Christmas when we were busking, we sang that wassail, and we were raising money for a local charity that provides meals for homeless people. And I couldn't help thinking about the connection between the words of the wassail and what we were doing. So we were raising money, for people who didn't have enough. I'll just quote a couple of, or paraphrase a couple of words from the wassail. So, you know, come on, you well-off people, you're living a life of ease. Please give us poor folk something to drink or spare a few coins. So that's what we were saying, spare a few coins to help those who are less fortunate.
Gosh,
so I just felt that real connection.
Isn't that amazing? It's actually, I was going to ask you, there's a slight strangeness. We're singing songs that were sung in the winter in Cornwall and singing them in what is your midsummer. But when you present it like that, it's right on the ball, isn't it? I mean, that's what happened. The people were very, they were hungry. They were actually out begging, effectively, using the wassail to raise money to have a good time at Christmas. And that's exactly what you were doing. You were raising money for people who needed that support. I think that's fantastic. Yes.
Putting another layer of meaning to that traditional song.
Yes. But it seems like the Cornish took a lot of their culture in terms of singing and Christmas traditions out to you. Broken Hill has retained those traditions, despite it being sunny.
Yeah, in particular, the Cornish Carols were very popular. They were very popular in South Australia and also here in Broken Hill. So right from the early days, probably up until about the 1950s, the Cornish Carols were sung and were very popular. I've got another little show and tell here.
All right.
This is a collection of Cornish carols. This belonged to my grandmother.
Oh, right.
So she was in a choir.
Raise it up a little bit and we can see the whole thing. Wow. Yes. And your grandmother had that.
Yeah, so that's just, you know, a little part of the Cornish carol singing that used to happen here in Broken Hill. Something interesting that I was thinking is they were very traditional 19th century carols and they were wonderful and popular at a particular time. And then the popularity sort of waned a little bit. But the wassail is sort of a tradition that goes back even further, and yet it's sort of breathing a new vitality into some of the Christmas traditions. So it's an interesting mix.
It is an interesting mix because I found a reference to the wassail in the medieval Cornish mystery plays. So we are really going back a very long way there.
Hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah.
Yes, and here we are with effectively a living tradition with the Cornish diaspora in Australia, in the Australian outback. I mean, that's fantastic. Sometimes there's a feeling that the diaspora connects up with the family history Cornwall, with a very different Cornwall than the one we experience today. But there's a sense in which by singing in Cornish, you're connecting with a modern Celtic revival.
That's a really interesting thought, because we didn't set out to become part of the Cornish revival, but that's become part of our journey. And my pathway into music and language study was fueled by an interest in family history. But then, you know, I've moved on and it's really exciting to discover new songs and see what's actually happening now in Cornwall. So, you know, you've got to remember what happened in the past, but sort of become immersed in the present and look to the future as well.
Now, you're clearly a thriving choir. What are your plans for the future?
Well, I've been really enjoying, as I've been learning the Cornish language, I've been sort of doing all sorts of researching and finding new Cornish songs. So everywhere I look, I'm discovering all these exciting new Cornish folk songs. So I think it's lovely the way the Cornish culture and the folk songs are sort of evolving. And so I've got a few other songs that I think will be lovely for the choir at the moment.
Well, you are making these songs your own. You're singing them in your own way. You're adapting them to what you do, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, well, to me, and I think you've said something similar in the past, you know, folk music should be allowed to live and breathe so that it takes on meaning for every community, every choir that encounters it. So it really resonates for that particular group. So one of the songs that we've just started singing in the last week or so, it's by Mathi Abdowi, and it's called Holia Spiris Tremor. So it's about a Cornish miner who goes overseas to Wallaroo. And when I first stumbled on this, I thought, oh, we've got to do that one, because a lot of people went to Wallaroo and then they came to Broken Hill.
Yes, yeah.
So that's we've just started doing that, and Mark very kindly gave us permission to sing the song, and very generously he also allowed me to add an extra verse where the person then goes on to Broken Hill.
That's fantastic. Now, I wonder if you might have a snip of Matty's song for us to listen to, Holia Spiris Tremor.
Yes, actually, we've only just started learning it, but we can give you, I guess, a sneak preview of how it's going so far with the choir.
Let's listen to it. Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Miraz.
Once you get a big Ostramo, Wallerco enemy. Once you get a big, all your spirits tremble. Once you get a big Ostramo, Wallerco enemy. Once you get a big, all your spirits tremble. Oh, brother, if one little Wallaroo, Ganya Cobber, Patrigus in Pella to all your coral, all your banadu, all your spirits tremble. Oh, brother, if one little Wallaroo, Ganya Cobber, Patrigus in Pella to all your coral, all your banadu, all your spirits tremble. Once you get a big Ostramo, Wallerco enemy. Once you get a big, all your spirits tremble. Once you get a big Ostramo, Wallerco enemy. Once you get a big, all your spirits tremble. And Jola Lamas and Jola Ganis, and David Dan and Doro Palace, and Jola Sonus and Hila Goddess, and all your spirits tremble. And Jola Lamas and Jola Ganis, I gave you Dan and Doro Palace, and Jola Sonus and Hila Goddess, and all your spirits tremble. Once you get a big Ostramo, Wallerco enemy. Once you get a big, all your spirits tremble. Once you get a big Ostramo, Wallerco enemy. Once you get a big, all your spirits tremble.
Hello, Robynne.
Right, there you go. Oh, look, I just given up hope.
Oh no, sorry, no, you're with us. Sorry, we're in a different window. You're only coming out of the computer here, so I don't know if you can hear Robynne on the speaker.
A little
bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's lovely to see you again. I so enjoyed that conversation with Merv, thank you. And I love this kind of very contemporary sense of musical exchange and connection between Cornwall and Broken Hill as you give the old songs new context and even adapting to speak to Broken Hill today. I've had a look online and we've got some people joining us, but I haven't seen any questions in the chat yet. So do you have a question for Robynne from the room at all? Yes, Mel.
Which carols were in her grandmother's book?
Oh, Mel is asking which carols are in your grandmother's book.
Well, here, just a minute.
Turning up as much as possible.
So there were a lot of old traditional carols. Things, I'll just read some of them out. Awake with joyful strains of Merv. On the listening ear of night by J.H. Thomas. Blessed child of royal birth. Let us swell our tuneful note by J.L. Davey. So they're not carols that I've sung. It's I'll sort of get this as a piece of the history. So I've got the book there just to refer to.
Yeah, it's a lovely book.
So it's a nice connection to a previous tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more questions in the room? Yes, please.
Not so much a question as an observation, something that you said. And also I heard mentioned a couple of nights ago on stage, the role of Cornish poetry and song in helping spoken Cornish to flow and be a little bit less halting politically sometimes.
So, just relaying over, we have a comment from the back of the room about the role of Cornish language, poetry and song.
Cornish song and poetry helping spoken Cornish flow.
Cornish song and poetry helping spoken Cornish flow. That's something I actually kind of wondered if you could speak a little bit more about your experience of singing in Cornish amongst your choir members and what the reaction to singing in Cornish has been.
But as I mentioned earlier, firstly I've been learning Cornish, but the rest of the choir only know a few words of Cornish, so they've really enjoyed singing songs in Cornish and I suppose embraced the culture, so they've been keen to learn a few words. But I think the people who don't speak the language, being able to sing it is an easier way into the language. So it engages different parts of the brain. So I think they engage more easily, having not spoken any Cornish, singing it rather than trying to learn to speak it first. And I found that as well.
That's so interesting. I'm sure there are other people in the audience and elsewhere who had similar experiences. Any more questions from our audience? You can't see us, Robynne, but we've got a good gang of people here in the Dow room at Crescent Kerno who really enjoyed that lovely presentation. Yes, two over there.
Any connection between the Celtic revival, the Celtic revival, the Renaissance, and the voice in Australia? I think you mentioned the voice.
Yeah. Okay. So question number one is concerning thinking about the Celtic revival and the Brythonic revival, we said, and thinking about the voice, and you were talking about the referendum recently.
Yes. Do you see any connection?
The question is, do you see any connection between the two things?
So the voice referendum in Australia you're talking about?
Yes.
I can see a lot of, as I've been learning Cornish and learning about the struggle to sort of maintain culture and language, I can see a really strong parallel between that and the Indigenous people in Australia keeping their language and culture strong. So here in the Broken Hill area, there's the Winyakali people and the Barkindji people. And the Barkindji people in particular have been, they started teaching their language in the school. So there's a very strong sense of trying to maintain culture and language, dance, art, all the different art forms that go along with it. So there's an interesting parallel between what's happening with the Cornish language and what's happening with Indigenous culture in Australia. So it gives you a sort of a deeper respect for what Indigenous people are doing in maintaining their own language and culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've also had a really nice connection. I did a talk here in Broken Hill for the local historical society about the Cornish heritage, and it's traditional to acknowledge the Indigenous people of the region you're in. So when I did that particular talk, I did the acknowledgement of country in Cornish and made the connection between me learning Cornish and Indigenous people keeping their own language strong. So yes, there's a very strong sense of maintaining your culture, whether it's Indigenous or whether it's Cornish.
Yeah, that's it's so interesting, and that question of language reclamation and giving you that insight and perspective into the struggle of First Nation and Indigenous communities is perhaps unexpected on the one hand, but obvious when you think about it on the other. Richard, you had a question?
It's quite light-hearted. I'm always interested in food and wondering if Cornish cuisine has survived in Broken Hill.
Did you catch that, Robynne, at all?
No, I'm waiting for you to tell me.
Richard's question says it's very light-hearted. He likes talking and writing about food and wondered if any Cornish cuisine has remained in Broken Hill.
Sorry, I lost the sound there a bit.
Oh, sorry.
Just say that again, please.
Is there any remnant of Cornish cuisine in Broken Hill? Cornish cooking?
There's pasties have been part of Broken Hill culture, South Australia and Broken Hill culture. People talk in other places about Cornish pasties, but here they're just pasties. So that aspect. Different people that I've spoken to who have had Cornish family in Broken Hill from the very early days talked about some of the other cakes and things that their family used to make as well. But Cornish pasty suppers were very popular, particularly in the early days here.
I can imagine, even if they're not Cornish pasties, you know, and we know that there's that connection. We've got a couple more minutes. I don't want to cut anyone else's question off if you've got one. Yes?
What about younger people in Broken Hill? And I'm thinking about, under 20s or maybe under 30s. Have they got any interest at all in Cornish heritage and culture?
Right. The question is, what about younger people in Broken Hill, say the under 20s and the under 30s? Do they have any interest in Cornish heritage in the area?
That's an interesting one, because I've mainly spoken to older people. It seems to be as you get into your 40s and 50s that you start taking an interest in the heritage. And the bookshop where I work, I've got, you would have seen in the pre-recorded part, the little sign there, Cornish in here. And I often get people coming into the shop telling me all about their Cornish heritage. But it seems to be, as you get older, you sort of become more interested in that. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with the next generation.
Did you hear all that? Okay, great. That's my sense as well, is that certainly in overseas communities that I've visited, as people get older and sometimes have more time to think about these things if they've retired or have an interest that they want to pursue, and they get interested in their heritage and their local area. Maybe not necessarily they have Cornish family heritage, but they are interested in engaging in their local area's history. It's one of those things that it always seems to think, the average sort of demographic is of an older age, but in my experience and conversations, it's something that people often age into as an interest.
I think that will happen because here in Broken Hill we've got 140 years of Cornish heritage. So obviously those earlier generations have died, but the subsequent generations have taken an interest and maintained the stories.
Yeah, lovely. I think we've got time for one more question if there is one in the room. I think we have... No? Yes, no? Okay. Robynne, I think that is the end of our questions. Thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure to hear you talking about the choir and all the work that you've done and the songs, just fascinating. Please stick with us on the Zoom meeting if you'd like to, but I know that it's late in Australia. So yes, don't worry, you'll be able to listen back to all the rest of the presentation as part of the live stream when this is finished. But thanks so much, and a round of applause for Robynne, please. Right, so I'm not sure that Richard needs ever so much of an introduction, but Born and bred in Cornwall, in Cornwall's clay country, and a singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist. Richard takes huge inspiration from not only the local landscape, community and industrial heritage, but also from the stories of the Cornish diaspora. He's travelled to some far-off places to perform and be inspired. So I will let Richard take it away.
Thank you. Just getting this cittern in tune. It's got 10 strings, and if any one of them are slightly out, it sounds hideous. But it was made by Davey in Redruth, so we'll blame him. So you can see on my starting slide here, this is a piece of Trethewey silver, or it's a piece of dolomite with some Trethewey silver in it. And you might think that that's a very large rock, but it's actually this one here. But it's very heavy, if not big. But I'll come on to that later. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the songs that I've written or been involved in, involving the diaspora, and it's by no means exhaustive. It's just the ones that I've been involved with. So the next slide, I think, Merv. So this is the songs and things I'll talk about. So Richard Jose, who obviously, he was, well, not obviously, but he was born in Lanna and emigrated to the US. And then I'm going to talk about Cola's Gold and the Cola Goldfields and show you some of the project I was involved with that. And then Trethewey Mine in Canada, some Tretheweys that emigrated from the St Austell area, from Guthers, just outside St Denis. Mineral Point in the US, I went there with the Mousel Cat and have composed music about there. And then Ballarat as well. And these are sort of chronological in the times that I wrote them, so I thought that's as good a order as any. And then finally 10,000 Miles, which is a song that's hugely widespread across the world, but to me it speaks of emigration and separation, and so I've recorded that twice in different lineups, kind of referencing emigration. I think we skipped Richard. There he is. So this is Richard Jose. As I said, he was born either up the road or down the road in Lanna, however you want to think of it. And he was the eldest child of 5 children. And at the age of 14, his father died, and he was then responsible for bringing in a wage for the family. And with tin prices crashing, he had to go to America to earn a living. And so he travelled to Plymouth firstly, and then across the Atlantic, and was supposed to be met by an uncle in New York, but the uncle never showed up. So as a 14-year-old, he was by himself in America, and he actually walked from New York to Nevada, right across the states of America. But even at this age, he had an amazing countertenor voice, which was popular at the time. And they called him the Singing Kid, and he sang on board the ship as it travelled to America, and then he found work singing in bars and saloons to miners that had already emigrated. So I'll sing you the song. And then he came back to Cornwall in 1895, and he got off the train in Redruth, and he had to walk again, which I think is unfair. But it was only to Lanna this time, which wasn't quite so bad. And people put candles and lanterns in their windows and welcomed him home to show him the way if he'd forgotten it. I suppose the other thing that's worth mentioning, actually, the tune I borrowed, it's a traditional tune, which is a song, The Blind Fiddler, which is an American folk song. So that was intentional.
I am a man from mining stock, and my story I will tell. Just how I left my native land to cross the ocean swell. A boy made man in a foreign land when times at home were sad. I am the singer Richard Joseph and far from my home. My father died leaving children 5 and a wife quite destitute. So the eldest son was forced to roam and the new world forced to choose. Upon a train to Plymouth town and a winter crossing wild, I am the singer Richard Joseph and far from my home. As the seas grew high and the storms let fly, I sang carols from my land. With the ice and rain they eased the pain of every child and man. The singing kid they called me till we reached the New York shore. I am the singer Richard Joseph and far from my home. From New York to Nevada, I crossed deserts cracked and dry. I sang in bars to miners, and the old songs made them cry. I found work in Reno with a blacksmith cousin there. I am the singer Richard Joseph and far from my home. Had to leave the blacksmith shop, I was put up on the stage. I sang in San Francisco and I sang proud on Broadway. I toured the world and earned my fame up on silver threads in gold. I am the singer Richard Joseph and far from my home. I crossed the wave to Cornwall in 1895. A candle burnt in every home, a grown man had to cry. Singing in the chapel, it's far from the Broadway stage. I am the singer Richard Joseph, and my heart lies here always.
Thank you. The next slide. So then, in 2019, one of the bands I play in, the Wearne, took on a rather ambitious project, a year-long project, looking at the story of the Cornish that went to India to work and mine there. But I think we'll play the video, or some of the video, because it explains it much better.
Now for a lovely story. A folk band has produced an album exploring the forgotten history of a Cornish mining community that once worked in India.
Yes, Coala's Gold by the group The Wearne explores the lives of Cornish miners and their families who lived in the Coala goldfields. Holly Clemens has been finding out about the fascinating story behind Cornwall's Indian gold miners.
This is an incredible part of Cornwall's history.
The story of the Cornish in India is so unknown.
I really felt that this was something that people should know about.
Cornwall's mining history is well documented, but this is the forgotten story of tin miners who went in search of gold.
Cornish miners were really struggling for work, and from the late 1800s onwards began travelling to India, to the Coala goldfields. And so over time, a really large Cornish community built up at the Coala goldfields in India.
After stumbling on the story, musician Laura Garcia set out to find the people who were part of that community.
I had a very lovely childhood, very lucky, very lucky. In his letters, he said, arriving at Coala goldfields, he said it was like a small town. There was everything.
Pauline's father's letters to her mother before they were married inspired Laura's band, the Rowan Tree, to write a song about the 3 years of correspondence, a pen-pal relationship that resulted in marriage when Roy returned to Cornwall on leave.
when I heard it, I thought I have to write a song about this. I'm always inspired to write songs when there's an incredible story that could otherwise not be told or could be lost. In living memory history now, which when you look at the Cornish emigration to Australia and America, it's not so much in living memory, but we've got first-hand accounts of people that were out there. So I think it's a very unique and special history.
Pauline's mother Olive went back to India with Roy and started a family. It's stories like these that led the Rowan Tree Band to create an album between musicians from the Cola Goldfields and Cornwall. A year-long project celebrating two communities 5,000 miles apart.
It felt such a natural thing when we heard it. It was really surprising. I couldn't have anticipated it working so well.
Laura's research has put friends and family back in touch 80 years on. And for Pauline,
towards the end of my life, to have gone a complete circle, it's been really uplifting and an experience I never ever thought I'd have. Just wonderful.
It is a fascinating story, and Laura, who we saw there in the report, is with us in the studio now. What's it been like to be part of telling this story and sort of piecing it all together?
It's been amazing, and it's been a real privilege because people have opened their homes and their family histories to us, not just in Cornwall but also in India. So we have felt in a very privileged position to be able to tell their stories through the music.
And you've made some really good friends, haven't you?
Oh, I've made friends for life from this project. We all have, actually. Again, people in India that I never expected to meet, and so many people in Cornwall that have got involved. It's been
You're going
brilliant.
to perform a piece for us in a moment called SS Carthage, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
Tell us what the significance of that ship was.
Well, the SS Carthage was the ship that Pauline's father Roy travelled out to India on, and while he was aboard he sent letters home to his family, and Pauline shared those letters with us, and so they've inspired the music on that track.
And how surprised were you how much you found out when you started digging into this?
Oh, it was mind-blowing really, because we thought no one knew anything about it, and then all these people in the community started getting in touch with us. And it was incredible to find in these houses in Cornwall just how many photographs and letters and everything. And people have been able to connect with each other, which has been one of the most special things about it.
And that connection continues now, because what happens to the money that you raise from the album?
Well, the money, half of it goes to the Cornwall Heritage Trust so they can fund further projects like ours, because they funded this one, but also to India, to the KGF Schools Foundation, which was set up by ex-pupils when the school at the Cola Goldfields was crumbling, and they rebuilt it and provide an education for children that otherwise wouldn't be able to go to school.
We're going to hear some of your music in a moment. Thank you very much for coming in.
I think he talks about the weather at that point. So I'm going to sing the song that was sort of talked about a bit there, Man of Letters, which is one of the songs I wrote for the project. As musicians in the band, we each took up a story and kind of ran with it, and whether that be an instrumental piece of music or a song. But it was when I heard the story about Pauline's father, I think the next slide, probably, there we are. So it's when I heard this story that Roy had gone out to India already in the 30s, and his family were trying to send him a parcel from Perranporth, and the girl in the post office took one look at it and said that this will never reach India, and so she sewed their parcel into material and repackaged it and sent it to Roy. And then Roy got this and was so moved that someone had taken the trouble to do that for him that he wrote to Olive and thanked her. And this started a 3-year correspondence, and then he came back to England because he was up in Southampton, I think. And they got married, but they got married down in Cornwall, and then went back out to India. And so this song's based partly on Roy's original letters. He was a proper Cornish engineer and sent such detailed letters about the design of the ship and about the oceans and everything that he'd seen travelling across the world, and the temperatures of the water and everything. And then partly the words are also Pauline's words, because she was in India until she was 3 or 4, So she was born out there and can remember the smell of monsoons coming and the skies turning green and particular plants. So I recorded conversations with her, and so the song's an amalgamation of those. But it's written as a duet, so I've had to sort of adapt some of the words, but we'll see how that goes.
I'm a man of many letters, an engineer by trade. I've walked the sands of Perrin, but in India I was made. I told you of our voyage, the wonders that I saw, the ship, the waves, the currents, our arrival on that shore. A parcel from my mother reached this foreign land, packaged so securely by an unfamiliar hand. This work was not my mother's. I wrote to ask them who had wrapped it up so neatly. She told me it was you. We have always walked on sandy roads. Some things are meant to be. Whether Perrin or Cola, no matter how far, yes, I know they're meant to be. I told you of the seasons, the flaming dancing trees, the haze upon the mountains that one day you would see. I knew one day you'd join me to watch the skies turn green and smell the monsoon coming and hear it on the trees. I wrote of all our progress, our love grew from afar. I shared with you my vision and my beloved car. And so began our journey, and from this parcel grew a love to span the oceans, to see our whole lives through. We have always walked on sandy roads. Some things are meant to be. Whether Perrin or Cola, no matter how far, yes, I know they're meant to be. I will keep her safe, I will keep her well. I will write to her over and over and over till she knows me so well. I will keep them safe, I will read them well. I will read them over and over and over till my heart knows him well. I will keep her safe, I will keep her well. I will write to her over and over and over till she knows me so well.
So the next song, alluded to it earlier, is about some Tretheweys that left Guthers just outside St Denis, or the family left there in the mid-19th century. And they went out firstly to Ontario and did a bit of everything. They did a little bit of mining, a bit of logging, but nothing really took off. So they went to British Columbia and tried a bit more over there. But then it was William Trethewey that went back to Ontario because he heard stories that they were starting to find stuff out there. And when he got there, he walked out into the woods, so pretty much the first night he was there, and he found a pinkish bloom, he described it as, on the rocks, and that's a sign that there was silver in these rocks. And so he went back to the mining camp and had to act very cool because he didn't have his mining license, which he was getting the next day. So he chipped the rocks with his axe, and sure enough, there was silver there. And he had to go back to the mining camp and cover it up and go back the next day. And so then that was the Trethewey mine that they dug. I've got some photos. I think there's 3. So this is Trethewey mine there. And then the next one, this is William and Joe, who formed the chorus of my song. So William was the one who discovered this, and the same day he actually discovered another huge amount of silver, the Coniagus mine, he described it as, which is a place name made up of element symbols, which is a different way of naming places. But so he then wrote to his brother Joe, who was in British Columbia, and said, "You've got to come out here." And he gave him a share. I think he gave him an eighth in the mine. And it's Joe Trethewey that I'm arguably descended from. Yeah, it depends whose family history is correct, but I might be about 7th cousin to somebody I'm in touch with in Canada. But it was actually the Cobalt Historical Society that sent me the rock. During lockdown, it was amazing to get a post, which was so exciting. And they've been wonderful and really informative and helpful, and also very excited that someone is interested in their town, because it's a very small mining town that's not connected by railway anymore. So they're really thrilled that someone's interested, I think. I think there might be one more. So yeah, this is shaft sinking. So this is when they actually dug the Trethewey mine. But William sold to Trethewey mine after only a couple of years, but he sold it for $105 million in 1905, I think it was. So you can hold the rock, but you can't keep it. Okay. So the chorus of this one imagines the family's sort of other life that they might have had if they'd stayed in Cornwall in a way, and so it imagines William and Joe as children dancing in the feast day, and it features a little snippet of a tune I've adapted from the Rescorla Snail Creep, which is the Clay Country tune at the end.
Brother Joe, I write to you to tell you of our fate, from moving here to Canada and the fortune we could make. Father first found silver here, Fraser Valley by the lake. The silver there in Providence no more was ours to take. Written that the silver here, like stove lids in the ground. The stoves out here must be bigger, Joe, but it's more than that I found. Will and Joe were running to the show just to see where trouble can be found. With Sue and Sally all on their arms, they would dance the feast day round. Come out then, Brother Joe, said Will, and leave the lakeside shore. The slabs of silver hidden here, the size of our barn door. A pinkish bloom upon the rocks, a wondrous sight to see. To tell you then what my heart felt, the feelings that came over me. I covered up as best I could the riches that I found, with moss and sticks and anything that lay there on the ground. Will and Joe were running to the show just to see where trouble can be found. With Sue and Sally all on their arms, they would dance the feast day round. Next day I went back to the woods to stake my claim for sure. My name and number marked the spot. The same day I found more of all the silver in the land, the riches to be seen. Just one day to change a man, the silver it found me. The stage is set for more to come, there's more for us to find. I see that there's a share for you, come out to Trethewey mine. Will and Joe were running to the show just to see where trouble can be found. With Sue and Sally all on their arms, they would dance the feast day round. Will and Joe were running to the show just to see where trouble can be found. With Sue and Sally all on their arms, they would dance the feast day round.
So I'll tell you a little bit about, this one's not very long actually. This is more of a slideshow of my holiday, which wasn't really a holiday. In 2019, we were very lucky, it was just before COVID, it was September 2019 I think. I was involved in the Mouse or Cat children's theatre show for quite a few years, and we took that out to America, which was an amazing experience, but quite hard getting there because of someone who was in charge at the time. Not of the Mouse or Cat, of America. But we took it out there and performed the Mouse or Cats in Mineral Point and then in Duluth as well in Minnesota, and just had the most amazing time there and met a whole Cornish community that felt like you'd walked down Redruth High Street. It visually looked quite similar, and there's cafes there, the Red Rooster Cafe that serves pancakes and stuff like that, but also Cornish pasties, and Figgy Hobbin, which was partly my question earlier about food, that it was interesting that Figgy Hobbin had survived in Mineral Point as a very common Cornish food, but it's not so common in Cornwall, I would say now. So it's interesting how different communities do kind of preserve different aspects of culture. So this is Catherine Whitford here, and she runs, or used to run, a shop in Mineral Point in the High Street, in the main street there, which was full of Cornish books and jewellery and scarves and things you can see in badges. And she was 91 at the time in this photo, and she would be in her shop every day working and selling these things. And she was a bard of the Cornish Scorseth, and worked tirelessly, I think, for Cornwall. Was hugely passionate. She fairly recently died, so she would be 94 or 5 when she died. So then some other pictures. That's the Mineral Point Opera House where we performed the Mouse or Cat, and people were queued down the street with cat ears from the whole length of Mineral Point. And it was really interesting to seeing how a completely different culture, I suppose, embraced the show, and they really went for it and laughed at different points in the show that we'd never got a laugh before, and it was just a very interesting experience. So that was on stage. We used to perform it in the round, but had to adapt to the Mineral Point Opera theatre there. which is a beautiful building built around the time that emigrants were out there. An artistic shot from stage. And then two lovely Cornish maids celebrating this wonderful sign of the most Cornish town in America. And then whilst we were there, I wrote and definitely named, if I didn't write it there, it was Emerging, this tune, on the veranda, I suppose you'd call it, of our accommodation. So this is a holiday video with Beck Appleby doing a bit of an introduction, I think. But I just wanted to show you, because it had such a special feeling there, a real feeling of home, I think, actually, and such a welcoming community and very open-minded community, which we hadn't really expected in Midwest America. But it was a very, very open-minded community. So this is Mineral Point.
I'm just going to do a little.
So that's one of the original buildings as well that we were staying in, which was amazing to stay in a building of such history. But in the town, there are some stone cottages that wouldn't look out of place in Redruth or Camborne, and just amazing to see how they've been preserved. And you walk in there, and there's all furniture that would, from the time, and a bar as well, which the Kiddlywink bar, I think it's called, isn't it? That's like a Cornish pub that you can go in. So I might very quickly, well, that was in Duluth as well, in Minnesota, we took it there, which was equally lovely. And then, I don't know if I'll have time to sing this one, but maybe I can flag people to go and check it out. But I was involved in a project, Letters from Australia, which was last year, or 2022, I think it was, in like May, June time. And it wasn't my project, which is why I've kind of, all this text is taken from the project itself, but it was run by, well, I got invited to do it through Nick Hart, who's a wonderful Cornish musician and choir director. But it celebrated the story of Cornish miners that went to Australia, obviously, but focused on the Osborne family from right down west, and they wrote home over a period of about 10 years, and a lot of the letters they sent home were quite, very honest accounts of being out there and how hard it was, and how they were very lonely and missing home and missing people at home. But then they find Ballarat, and their prospects improved there in the letters. And they said, we've got a good situation, and it talks about stopping mining, actually, and working on the farm, and having much more sociable hours, which tells you how hard mining is, because farming's pretty antisocial too, I think. But but I can point you to that amazing project. It was a multimedia project, which they projected the words of the letters on the ceiling in this amazing venue in Plymouth, and had surround sound of people reading it, and there's actors acting it, and so do look that up, Letters from Australia. And then the final one is 10,000 Miles, which I talked about earlier, but the picture tells you everything. That was from 1905, I think it was, of the outbound platform, completely full, and people above, mainly women, waving goodbye to their families, and then no one on the incoming platform. And I think the song 10,000 Miles, which we could hear a snippet of, perhaps. We recorded it with Camborne Town Band, and it was one of the songs in the Cola Gold project, and I recorded it before that as well. So thank you very much, and we'll hear a little bit of that. I've got Cola Gold CDs that you can look at, or if you want to buy them, you can. The money, as we said, gets split between the two charities. And I've got songbooks which tell a lot of these stories as well. So, and come and look at the silver.
She's sitting on yon ivy tree. She's weeping for her.
Round of applause for Richard, please. So the last thing I want to do is cut Richard off or cut that lovely song off, but I wanted to give some time for questions before we move on to Jim. So if anyone's got any questions in the room for Richard?
I hope I got away with that by overrunning.
Yes, Mel?
Is there still a Cornish community in Cornwall?
It's very fondly remembered, but the mine stayed operational until about 2001. It's sort of not dissimilar timescale, you know, with property and, you know. But I think the Cornish had left by the 80s, and obviously with India gaining independence, it started, a lot of them started leaving in 1947 and the 50s especially. And so Pauline's family came back and grew up in Pauline and spent most of her life in this country. But yeah, so but then the Cornish had pretty much left by the 80s.
Yes.
The whole India thing's a complete surprise to me, that my grandfather was a mining engineer in India.
Oh wow.
And I didn't know anything about the project that you've done.
We've got a huge section on the website which is still there, it will always be there, full of resources and information and lists of passengers that, you know, went on ships out there. But yeah, look that up.
Mind-blowing, hearing about, you know, I can't find out more about it.
And I think that was part of the, you know, the inspiration for the project, was that we relatively know a lot about Australia and the US and the various places, but there's very little written about India, and an amazing history, and now people that have been connected, that Pauline is now in touch with a lady who lives in Lowender, who also was born in KGF, but they didn't know they existed, and there's somebody else in Ireland, and they speak on the phone every week, and so that's been the lovely thing that's come out of it.
Lovely.
Yeah, I want to know what your next project is.
So I am about to release an album of river estuary inspired songs, and on one side it's going to be on vinyl, and then you turn it over and it's more industrial folk stuff. Mineral Point features on it, that tune. Yeah, lots of river estuary inspired stories. That's the next thing. It'll be out early next year, maybe March.
Question above? Yeah, the image on the final slide, the 10,000 mile one, where was that?
That's Redruth train station.
And where were they going?
That was South Africa for that particular.
Yeah, I couldn't quite read the caption. That's
but it's on, I don't know if you can on this one, but you can see Camborne Monument in the background.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought. It's just that I couldn't quite get.
Yeah, the footbridge is still the same, I think.
Yeah.
If you go to the Parklands, which is all about the Dust Bowl, they've got a big blown up image of that place.
Yeah, yeah.
When was that posing?
I think it was 1905 from memory. It's either 1900 or 05, I can't remember which one.
But someone very inspired took the picture though,
Yeah,
from distance.
I think just seeing the empty incoming platform is
Yeah.
just very striking.
Can I pause you and ask you to email Richard, because if we don't start Jim's piece, and I'm afraid we'll run over and I can't really do it. So email each other.
You can speak to me.
All right, another round of applause for Richard, please. So we've now got a presentation with Jim Wearne. As we're here, he has Cornish heritage, as his family headed to the US during the 19th century, and he's been writing and performing music that expresses his Cornish identity and draws awareness to Cornwall and aspects of Cornish life in various ways. This is with Merv.
Welcome, Jim, our Cornish American bard from Illinois, I think. Is that right?
Yes, thank you, and hello to people watching. But yes, I'm in the Chicago area of northern Illinois, and lived around here pretty much all my life.
There we are. Now, actually, we can't do a better introduction than to play one of your songs, and it's Cornwall once again. So here we go.
Now we sing our Cornish land and our Cornish breed, subject now to foreign law, oppressed by foreign greed. Ours by right her shores and fields, ours the triumph when we bring the pride of nationhood to Cornwall once again. All who work for Cornish pride and risk oppression's sword, keep the goal always in sight of freedom's great reward. Go in peace to win the prize with law and vote and pen. The time is near, the world will hear of Cornwall once again. All who live across the sea look homeward now and sing. Sing of all the love you hold, the help that you can bring. Keep the flame of hope alive and burning on till then, until the day when all return to Cornwall once again. When the day of freedom dawns, soon we dare believe. Not too late, we hope will be injustice to relieve. So until that day has come, and the great Amen, we lift our voices one and all for Colonel once again.
Well, there we are. Shades of a nation once again, I think, Jim.
Well, yes, and when I was writing it, I found myself writing that once again, and I thought, oh, no, leave it, leave it.
It captures the moment, doesn't it? Now, tell us a bit about your Cornish ancestry. Where does the Cornish bit fit in?
Well, the family originates or emigrated from Hillston, Wearne area. There are Wearnes in the area still, and I'm pretty sure I'm related to some. And so my great-grandfather came over to mine, and this was late 19th century. It's the same stories you've heard 1,000 times from Cornish Americans. One of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, did well there, then bought himself a farm in southern Michigan. At that point, his father, who was in his 80s, as I recall, became widowed, and my great-grandfather asked him to come over and live with them in Michigan. So he upped stakes and came across in his advanced age over to Michigan. So my grandfather, born there, had the benefit of Cornish parents. His mother, a prior, was also a Cornish immigrant, and his own grandfather. And so he was raised in quite a Cornish atmosphere.
When did you first become aware of your own Cornish identity yourself?
Well, I'd been involved in folk music and such, and I never felt like I was being real honest with myself. I mean, singing railroad songs, and I've never worked on a railroad, that sort of thing. So I thought, well, I'll sing the songs of my people. Well, who are my people? And it turned out to be a little harder to find out than I thought. In that, and I won't go on and on about it, but over here, most people of Cornish ancestry aren't really aware of their Cornish ancestry. The emigration records all say that the great grandfather is somebody came from England. It might say emigrated from Truro, England, and sailed out of Liverpool. So what are they to think? And so it was very much like that. Plus, even though, as I said, my grandfather grew up with Cornish people all around, they had been, well, I use the word brainwashed in those days to thoroughly believe that, yes, okay, you're Cornish, but Cornish is also English. And it's so much easier to say that we're English. And so the Cornish bit was a little hard to distill out, but I managed.
And that's where the underdog bit comes in, is it?
Yes. Yes, I'm afraid so. I've always been a bit of a fan of the underdog. I'm definitely politically on the left. I support labor, not capital L labor like you've got over there. They've got their own problems, but the working man and the underdog in general, I try what I can do to support them.
One of the songs that really does it for me, I have to say, ties straight into that, and that is Concrete and Steel. Should we listen to it now? Listen to it now, shall we?
By all means, thanks.
Cornwall is beautiful, Cornwall is green, Cornwall is history free to be seen. Farmers are laboring out on their lands, fishermen live by the strength of their hands. Once there was mining that blackened the sky, but filled Cornish pockets in days gone by. Now there are hotels and beds to be made, and drinks to be served in the cool Cornish shade. Here comes the concrete and here comes the steel. There go the villages, farms and green fields. Here come the Londoners, thousands a day. Where are the Cornish? Faded away. Started to notice a little while back a kind of imbalance, a want and a lack. Seemed to be more people serving the guests than doing the work that the Cornish do best. As time moved along, it began to be clear something was wrong, and it seemed very queer. Houses are growing where crops disappear, lived in by Londoners 1 month a year. Here comes the concrete, here comes the steel. There go the villages, farms and green fields. Here come the Londoners, thousands a day. Where are the Cornish? Faded away.
You don't pull any punches there. You don't represent Cornwall in the cosy media way that we sometimes see with the BBC, do you?
No, and it's cost me some friends. There is a song I recently wrote, and I published the lyrics to it, about people fighting within themselves, within the Cornish cause, hurting the cause. And there have been a couple of people that just don't speak to me since that. They feel like, that if people won't align with their idea of what's supposed to happen with Cornwall, they're not in favor of Cornwall. If I don't align with their ideas, I'm not worth talking to. And that sort of thing. It's not exactly divide and conquer on the part of the oppressor, but it's certainly letting the Cornish divide themselves and weaken their cause.
Well, there is a bit, isn't it, about Cousin Jack when he travels abroad, and he had to build two chapels, one he to go to and one he don't. And I think it's part of our culture, it's part of what we do. Now, who are the people that have influenced you? You know many people in Cornwall. Who are the people that influenced you most in your songwriting and your ideas?
Well, the first person that I was in touch with that was part of the folk community was Trev Lawrence.
Good old Trev, yeah.
Great memory. I remember at one point I was at the Old Vic, as it was then, and he sang a song for me, and I wanted to get it recorded, and so I left soon after, humming it to myself all the way back to where I was staying, and then got out the recorder and recorded it. So he was definitely an early influence. I soon thereafter ran across Harry Glasson. And
yes, yeah.
He, living legend, he's a legend in his own time, whereas I'm a legend in my own mind. But he has crossed over into the oral tradition, which is what we all aspire to. So I'm sort of going to put in a plug here. For one thing, as far as that Cornwall once again, that would sound just splendid, sung by a male voice choir, and I would encourage anybody that might agree with that to do something about it. Plus, I've got a bunch of songs that I'll never make a dime on, singing them myself. And if anybody's interested, they can get in touch with me. I'll tell them how to get a hold of these songs so they can cover them with folk groups and singers and like that. So I'm not trying to sell anything here, but I would love to get the songs out there.
Well, I am prepared to sell something here. We've got a whole load of your songs on the Cornish National Music Archive. And there we've got the words, we've got the music and so on. So if you're interested in some of your songs, that's the place people can find them.
Indeed.
Now, I think it's this one song you're doing Cornish, I believe.
Well, I tried doing Strawberry Leaves, as I'd said once some time ago in Cornish, and it worked out reasonably well. But more recently, although it's years ago now, I thought, what would it be like to record a Beach Boys song in Cornish? Wow. And so I asked the folks over there to give me a translation, and a couple of fellas did. And went into the studio and recorded Surfer Girl in Cornish.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't heard that. You'll need to get that one to us, I think.
Well, I certainly can do that. It was fun. I'll just put it.
It was fun. It was fun. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, part of our theme is about Cousin Jacks, as we're saying. And I think I would like to carry on now with another of your songs called Cousin Jack.
It's called Where's Cousin Jack? And not to be confused with Harry's song.
Right. Well, here we go.
And where's Cousin Jack? He hasn't been around. He's not out in his fishing boat or even underground. He's not out in the fields or on the city streets. Tell him I asked after him if ever you should meet. I see the little boy, American as me. He's got a Cornish great-grandfather in his family tree, and a Dane, a Sioux, a German, a Pole, a Serb, a Finn. Somehow poor old Cousin Jack got lost there in the din. And sometimes I encounter a Cousin Jack or Jen. I swear that I'm some glad to see a Cornish face again. But our hair is getting grayer, and some have passed along. Soon they'll look for Cousin Jack, only find a song. And where's Cousin Jack? He hasn't been around. He's not out in his fishing boat, or even underground. He's not out in the fields, or on the city streets. Tell him I asked after him if ever you should meet. Tell him I asked after him if ever you should meet.
Jim, does Cousin Jack, does this reflect your experience of being a Cornish American?
Very much. I have been in touch with quite a few Cornish American groups, the Cornish American Heritage Society, and state groups around. And we actually had an Illinois Cornish Society of our own, now sadly defunct. But I realized that, first of all, as I said, most people in the country that have Cornish ancestry are barely, if at all, aware of it. Even if they are aware of it, they might have, well, everybody's got 4 grandparents, for example, 8 grandparents, however that works. I'm no good with numbers. But one of those, say, great-grandparents may be Cornish. But then you've got Irish, German, Italian ethnicities, which are a lot more present, a lot more identifiable, and a lot more, well, frankly, popular. So a person, maybe even with a Cornish last name, might identify with his Irish great-grandfather or Italian great-grandmother or something like that. And even if they're aware of the Cornish angle, it just doesn't really feature very strongly. I was at one national meeting where there was a lot of talk amongst the attendees about how Cornish they were. Oh, I'm all Cornish. I'm a quarter Cornish. I'm half Cornish. And I got up on my hind legs and said, that doesn't matter at all. It's not that we're trying to do some sort of selective breeding program here. Most of us were well beyond that age anyway. But it's a matter of how much you care about your Cornish ancestry and the Cornish people and nation. That didn't go down too well, partly because a lot of the Cornish societies seem to be, the ones that still exist, sort of devolving into genealogical societies. They are not terribly interested in any Cornish folks that are actually alive. They want to go trace their ancestry online. When they go over to Cornwall, they'll go to the cemetery. They won't go to the pub. They'll go to the cemetery and write down names, then go home. So there's not as much interest in Cornwall as a living entity as maybe there once was. And I went at one point several years ago to Australia to a Cornish festival there. And I realized fairly soon, that they do a great festival, but their idea of Cornwall and the Cornish basically is, as far as I could tell, frozen at the point when the Cornish emigrated. That they look at the Cornish as people in these sort of 19th century outfits that they replicate, and they do their maypole dance. And they don't seem terribly interested in anything about Cornwall after that point. The contemporary political, economic situations, not interested.
That's very interesting, because there's a lot of synergy with what you're saying there, with what we feel in Cornwall, because it's not about ancestry.com. Mm-hmm. It's about your connection with Cornwall, about what you feel about Cornwall, regardless of your ancestry. If you're 0.16 Cornish, it must be. It's exactly what you said, which I think there's a lot of resonance. Now, do you think that the Cornish identity in the diaspora is fading?
I think definitely it is. I think of myself as perhaps a member of the last generation of Cornish Americans that it's getting so diluted, and I don't mean to circle back on myself about the percentages, but just the consciousness is getting so diluted that people are just not going to be aware of it. This is, I think, sometimes hard for people in Cornwall to understand. That is to say, just how much ignorance of Cornwall there is over here. And people in some of the Cornish areas, Mineral Point or other places here that are strongly Cornish, they say, yeah, well, we've got this strong, vibrant Cornish American community. I said, yeah, of 200 or 300 people out of 340 million.
Just 1 second. I forgot to plug the machine in, and it was about to go flat, but now it's working fine. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so that wouldn't help the situation, would it?
But that is very interesting. So, in a sense, what would be your message to us? In Cornwall, we've got our national minority status. We are actually thriving very well. But what's your message to us about the diaspora?
I think, sadly, you mustn't count on it for much. There are individuals that will do a lot, but they can't. It's sort of like someone swimming alongside a enormous cargo ship trying to push it and change its direction. It's not going to happen. But
we could be informing. We could be giving information about Cornwall and telling people.
Certainly, to spread the word, and that's something I, in my small way, try to do. But for example, if there was, I know there is something that would answer to the description of a Cornwall tourist office or something like that. If people could see occasionally on television a TV commercial about this wonderful tropical place, this beautiful area, come visit us. And guess what? These pictures aren't from Aruba. They're not from Hawaii. They're from Cornwall. We welcome you.
And we're Cornish and we're distinct and so on. Yes.
Yes, certainly the distinction. That's why I would. There would need to be something, I suppose, good-naturedly pointing out the distinction between Cornish and English. Certainly.
Right, Jim. Now, I would really like to hear this Surfer Girl. Shall we see if you've got a copy there?
Well, I think we can manage to cough something up for you here. So I'd love to have it be included on your program.
Let's round off with Surfer Girl.
Very good.
It's quite early in the morning with Jim. I think it's about 6:30 or 7:00. So it's probably gone back sleeping.
Okay, well, if we don't have Jim with us, then we've got more time for questions and discussion. We can go back to your question, which you didn't get to ask. But the things I wanted to ask Jim included thinking about what, he mentioned talking about having, there being an idea of getting a TV commercial over to America to bring Cornwall and Cornish landscape and people and distinctiveness over to the States. And that would probably be a great idea, but I wondered if he had any ideas, and if you in the room might have any ideas about what Cornish people, or people in Cornwall, and particularly the sort of creative heritage and cultural community that tends to congregate around Lowender and events like this, might be able to do to engage with the diaspora ourselves more or differently. That was a question I was going to ask, but I'd be happy to hear what you all think, or go back to Richard's questions.
I always thought one of the problems is the kind of digital culture, because whether we like it or not, the software emanating out of California or wherever always put Cornwall in England. Well, we've got no choice. 20 years ago, you could say, well, I'm from Cornwall and I'm British or whatever, European, and that's what would go on your address. Now you go and order something online and you've got no choice at all. You have to be Cornwall, England. And I suspect that's part of what Jim is referring to. It's the fact that it's a kind of overwhelming machine that places us there. And okay, that's a detail of address, but from that stems all the other things, which mean we lose our distinctiveness. And I think that's really what Jim was inferring in a sense. And it seems to be, it's interesting, it seems to be much sharper for him in the States than it is for our friends in Australia. I don't know whether that's actually the case, but that's what it seems to me to be.
It's not just Cornwall, England, though. And I live in Weybridge in North Cornwall, and when I often try and put that into certain sites or whatever I'm on, it makes me go Weybridge, England.
That's right.
And therefore Cornwall doesn't come into it at all. Yeah. It's bizarre.
It's an automatic decision that's taken away from us. We no longer have that choice. And I think for a very digital society, that is a problem.
And it goes to governmental level as well, because when you had registered polio tests, you had to put down that you were in England. Yeah. There's no option to not be in England, according to the government.
Digital theft of our identity, yes.
Question.
Going back to the link to the diaspora, it's not so much a question as I've got relatives in South Africa, Australia, and I know they watch what I'm doing on Facebook, and my role in keeping them in touch with Cornwall is posting all the time things that are going on here. Yeah, which in class will be this event, whatever. And they said to me it keeps them in touch with what goes on in Cornwall. So it's only my individual relatives. I've never contacted any organisation. Yeah. But it keeps the links alive.
Yeah, and that comes with its advantages and disadvantages as well, because once upon a time we would all have been writing sheets of letters, yes, like you were saying, and our technology and the way we spend our time has moved on, and it means we can share more in some sense, but sometimes I feel like the immediacy of digital and social media means that we almost care less about what we share with people, because we just do it all the time unthinkingly. Anyway, that's my opinion. Sorry, question at the back.
Yeah, I've lived a lot of years in the States, and I can tell you that Port Isaac is full of Americans because they watch Doc Martin. Doc Martin, I swear, that's what people think Cornwall is from watching Doc Martin, and it's on all the stations in the States. So, more programs like Doc Martin, maybe.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's kind of exactly what Jim was saying. I was thinking, but there is that already. It's Doc Martin,
yeah,
and that's what people come.
And it's very, very popular.
Yeah, huge.
Podlark, isn't it?
I think it requires interaction in some way. That, like when we went to Mineral Point, we met people there, but then I stayed in contact with for 4 years, however many years it is, 3 years. And there's still collaboration and stuff between me here and people in Mineral Point because of that, but it was a face-to-face meeting, and
interaction in the first place that makes you want to stay in contact. But then I suppose the other side is with digital technology, getting in touch with the Cobalt Historical Society and then forming a relationship with them. But it's all interaction and shared experience, I suppose, that I think we need interaction to create new stuff and new connections and, get other people interested in that culture.
It's a ripple effect, isn't it? Because you build a relationship, and when it's a good relationship, that it ripples out. Question?
I wonder if it's still possible to get any of Wearne or Harry Goslin's material, like CDs or anything like that?
Yeah, and so there's some of both on the Cornish National Music Archive website and things that are free to listen to, but I'm not sure where we would point to. They both sell CDs, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you were to just Google them, and Harry's... Oh, sorry. There are songs to listen to and words to read for free on the Cornish National Music Archive website, but they both, I expect, have CDs available to buy. So if you can Google them, or if you can come and see us afterwards, and we'll see if we can put you in contact with either or both.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Yeah? Okay. Terry and then Nigel.
Basically, after my wife's comment about America, the great Doc Martin, the trouble is, it portrays us Cornish as a bit thick.
Yeah.
On many occasions, they think we're idiots here in Cornwall.
Yeah.
Which perhaps it should be turned the other way.
Yeah, it's
They're idiots there.
it's I've never watched it, I have to say.
I've
so
never
I
seen
can't.
it for that reason. I don't want to be portrayed as an idiot.
Yeah.
You're not an idiot.
And there's terrible references to Bob.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, hot balls.
I know. Nigel.
Oh, just a question about Richard Jones. I don't know how long he sang in America, for a long time obviously, but he Spanishized, if that's a word. Became Ricardo Jose, so perhaps a lot of people in America didn't realise, thought his background was actually Spanish and not Cornish.
Yeah, it was a conscious decision.
And the other thing, the chap, I can't remember his first name, Pangeli, who lived in Plymouth, became a Cornish bard, did a very good CD about Richard Jones.
Yeah, and that's...
I don't know how easily that is available.
That's on YouTube, you can
put
things on YouTube.
So, a lot of people in America would have thought he was Spanish and not Cornish.
Yeah.
So there's a question at the back.
Yeah, I'm not from Cornwall, and my question is really, what's the position of the Cornish language in Cornwall schools? Because as a teacher, I see the language as underpinning the culture. And I used to work briefly in the Isle of Man, and when they invited people from Ireland, there's an organisation called Gael Scolanna, it's about promoting Irish language in schools. And it was really interesting how they told the Manx to go about it, which is they just create play groups, because nobody will worry about you. Nobody will be against you. After years, that will put pressure on the primary schools. And then eventually you'll study your Manx in primary schools, and that'll put pressure on the secondary schools. Then you will get government opposition, but it's too late. And interestingly, there is a Manx-speaking primary school, at least one I know of, in St John's on the island. And that's happened since Gael Scolanna went there and told them how to do it. So has something similar happened in Cornwall, or what happened?
Well,
is there a Cornish-speaking primary school?
There is a school-wide programme called Go Cornish, and that's been new over the last 2 or 3 years. I know there's people in the room better qualified to speak on me than Cornish, but we have a Cornish language lead in Cornwall Council who is responsible for promoting the language and seeing how far we can push its recognition and build its use. There's Go Cornish. Davey, do you want to say something?
The first nursery school started, was all done this September.
Right.
So there is an active nursery school, which is immersion bilingual.
Right.
And within the primary school, there's no requirement under the curriculum to do Cornish. There is a requirement to do modern language. Now, schools can choose to do Cornish as a modern language, but most of them don't have the capacity or capability to do that. So that's an active thing. Cornish language is recognised under Part 2 of the European Charter, which is just about promoting respect. There is a campaign at the moment to move to Part 3 of the Charter, which would then involve the authorities in some active promotion and active engagement with ensuring that we do have language in schools.
So
but it's the next step.
Are you vote for it?
I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think nobody's going to stop working to.
It's astonishing. I find it astonishing that in a country, the Deputy Prime Minister stood up in Parliament 3 weeks ago, give or take, and he described the UK government as a beacon of liberty. And when you consider the plight, I choose my words carefully, the plight of the Cornish people, the indigenous Cornish people, and our humble attempts at just keeping our language alive and our story alive, it beggars belief that we can stand on the international stage and make claims like that without.
It is extraordinary, but I would say that the situation that the language is in now is, and I come to this as a person who's been learning slowly for 10 or so years. When I look back at where I started learning Cornish and I look at now, the change is massive and there's a lot to be hopeful for, a lot of resources, and it's down to the work of volunteers over the past 120 years putting in their own time and effort and passion, bringing the state of Cornish to what it is now. So I think there's a lot to be proud of and thankful for in that work. The gentleman next to you had his hand up again.
Just a comment, really, not a question.
Okay.
It was something in regard to what the lady said earlier regarding Dr. Martin. My sister and her partner have been funding from the Bulldog series and the Dr. Martin series for lots and lots of years. And I agree with the lady at the back. But what I will say is that we look at it, that possibly, if it wasn't that we were so backwards or really forwards and backwardness or whatever, would it ever be broadcast that we would ever know that Cornish people still existed in a worldwide media contact?
Yeah.
Possibly not. Whereas that media that spreads like that, even to the scheme that these people know we're still here.
Yeah, it's really complicated, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because what is it? Is it Warhol that said, "Don't read the publicity, just measure it in inches"? Just want to know. Don't need to know what they said. We just need to know how much they said. And there's something to that, but there's also the question of fair representation and accurate representation as well. I feel like we could probably all talk a lot more, but I'm conscious it's now beyond 3, and so I don't want to stop anyone having conversations they want to have, but I do want to say a huge thank you to you all for coming and enjoying these presentations. Thank you if you've joined us online. We should thank Crescent Kerno for hosting us. This has been lovely to be in here and be in person for the first time in 4 whole years. Huge thanks to Merv for doing all of the interview work and editing and getting me ready, and so we thanks to Chris Trevena here, who has been the technical wizard in the live stream. And if you don't know his work through Sounds Like Cornwall, which is an online archive of Cornish music of all stripes and all ages, then you should definitely go and look it up. And I suppose a last thing to say, just on the notice that this has been a sort of co-presentation with the Institute of Cornish Studies, is that there is a Cornish Diaspora Seminar series happening, which this has taken a spot on the programme of. The next one is in a couple of weeks with Ronald M. James, who is a US historian and folklorist and bard of the Cornish Gorsedd. He'll be talking online, so go and look on the university, the Institute of Cornish Studies Facebook for the Eventbrite link about the folklore of knockers and Tommy knockers emerging and evolving in the American West as Cornish miners went out there. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks, and we're hoping that there'll be more of those as well. I'm not sure if I've got anything left to say other than a huge thank you to our speakers. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, please enjoy the rest of Lowender. The Cornish National Music Archive project is a resource for everybody about Cornish music of all types in the diaspora here, and if you're at all interested, head over to the website, and if you've got questions, please get in touch. We're always happy to help and help you find out whatever you're interested in Cornish music, because we're interested in it too. Terry?
One thing, what about you, Kate?
Thanks, everybody.